Good morning, boys and girls. How are you? Today we're going to be working on, for math, a concept called halves, thirds, and fourths. So when we were studying our shapes, two-dimensional shapes now, flat shapes, we can partition. Partition is another fancy word for separate. So we can partition or separate our shapes into equal parts if we want to. Sometimes we do that. Okay? So for example, right here it says we can have two equal parts or two halves. Each part is half of the whole. So in this example, there's our circle. We have two equal parts. There's an equal part over here, part number one, and then there's another equal part down here. Well, what we have are two equal parts. Or we have two halves. There's one half here, and then there's the second half down here. Now, if you look at the box or the square we have the same thing. We have two equal parts or two halves. So there's one equal part here, and here's my second equal part here. So we have two halves. Now, what we can say is that each part is half. Each part is half of the whole. Okay? So this is a whole circle. And each part is half of the whole thing. Just like in this example here with the square. Each part is half of the whole or the entire shape. Alrighty? So now, in our next example, so we talked about halves, so I'm going to put a little check mark there. Now we're going to talk about, about thirds. So in thirds, three equal parts or 3/3. We can divide a shape into three equal parts or 3/3. Each part is a third of the whole. So let me explain what that means. Here's our circle again. And we divided it into three equal parts. There's one equal part. There's my second equal part here. And down here I have my third equal part. Okay? And each equal part, we call it a third. So there's 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. That's why it says three equal parts or 3/3. Now, same thing over here with our square. I divided it into equal parts or 3/3. There's one equal part. There's my second equal part and my third equal part. So once again with the square, what I did was I divided the three, I made three equal parts, or we call them 3/3. There's 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So when I see that shape, I go, oh, wow, that's divided into 3/3, three equal parts. Now, so let's put a check mark there. Now we'll talk about fourths. And fourths is really the same thing. So four equal parts or 4/4. So we have four equal parts in this circle. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now, that's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So four equal parts, or we call that 4/4. Okay? Same thing over here with the square. We have four equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we call that 4/4. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. It's pretty simple. Okay? Now each part is a fourth of the whole thing. So each one of these parts is called 1/4 of the whole shape. So this is 1/4 of the whole shape. Here's another fourth of the whole shape. Here's another fourth of the whole shape. That's another fourth of the whole shape. And same thing with the square. That's 1/4. That's another fourth. That's another fourth. And there's the last fourth. Okay? Alrighty, so let's review once again. When you look at these two shapes over here, you see that this circle, this circle and this square, well, they're both divided into two equal parts. Each part is called a half. This is divided into halves, two halves. There's one half and two halves. Each one of the parts is half of the whole thing. This is half of the whole thing. So is this. This is half of the whole thing. Now, in this example, we divided our shapes into thirds. 3/3. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And over here with the square, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Now, each part is called a third, 1/3 of the whole shape. Same thing over here. This is 1/3 of the whole shape. Okay, there's 1/3, there's 1/3, there's another third. So remember each little part. Okay. Now on the final example in red with our two shapes, with our circle and our square. Okay, the circle and the square are divided into 4 equal parts, or 4/4. There's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. And here we are again, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. Now each part is 1/4 of the whole thing. So that's only 1/4 of the whole thing. Part 2 is only 1/4 of the whole thing. Part 3 is only 1/4 of the whole thing. And part 4 is only 1 part of the whole thing. Okay? So, and we call each piece a fourth here because there's 4 pieces. And that's the same thing over here with the square. This is 1 part or 1/4 of the whole thing. This is another 1/4 of the whole shape. Here's another 1/4 of the entire shape, and there's the other 1/4 of the entire shape. Okay? So when you look here, before we start practicing, when you look at this shape, what I see is half. This circle is divided or partitioned in half. There's a piece here, there's a half here, and a half down there. Same thing over here. When I look at these two shapes, I see that they're partitioned into thirds. 3/3, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Now when I look at these two shapes, I see that they're partitioned into fourths. 4/4. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So now let's do a little bit of practicing. So I'm going to turn the board around and so forgive me. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn the board around. All right, let's see if we can see correctly. Let me check. All right, that's good. Let me adjust our camera. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to do exactly what it says. We're going to describe the equal parts. So we're going to look at these problems here. Problem number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And on these blank lines here, we're going to describe or write what they are, just like we did on the other side. So when you look at this shape here, yeah, it looks sort of like a rectangle. Okay? But when you look at it, do you think that's 2 halves? Is it 3/3? Or is it 4/4? Well, you have to look at it. And you look at the shape, and you see that it has, how many parts has it been partitioned or divided or separated into? I see 1 part, and then I see another partition. I see 2 parts. Now that reminds me of a half. So that looks like 1 half, 2 halves. So I'm going to write 2 halves right here. 2 halves. All right, that seemed easy enough. Now I'm going to look at number 2. That's a circle. How many partitions does it have? Or how many times has it been separated? Does it have 2 halves? No, I'm counting more partitions. I'm counting more pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just to be sure, I want to write that down. That's 1 partition, 2, 3, 4. If I remember, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So this has been divided into 4 pieces, and we call that 4/4 because there's 4/4. So I'm going to write this one, 4/4. Alrighty, now we're going to try number 3. So I want you to take a look at number 3. How many partitions or how many sections do you see we divided this rectangle into? 1, 2, 3. So let's number them. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you see 3 pieces, I'm thinking, gee, I'm remembering, I think those are called thirds. So I think I'm going to say, I think this is 3/3. There's 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So that's what I'm going to write here. In order to describe this shape, I have to say, oh my goodness, that's 3/3. So I'm going to write 3/3. T-H-R-E-E, thirds. Okay, so far we have 2 halves, 1/2, 2 halves. This is 4/4 because we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. And now we just finished 3/3. 1, 2, 3 partitions or sections. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Now take a look at that. Some people call that a peace sign, but how would you describe what that looks like? How many times have we partitioned it or separated it? How many equal parts are there? You're right, 3. So this is 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. So the way we describe this shape is, we're not going to call it a peace sign right now. We're going to call it, it's just like this one. It's just like number 3. We're gonna describe it as 3/3. So I'm gonna write 3/3. Pretty simple. Now we're going to do something separate down here at the bottom. So on the bottom, it says that we have to draw lines. We're going to draw now. We're going to draw lines to partition each shape. Now remember what partition means? I remember it means to separate. Draw lines to separate each shape. See, but I just don't know how many lines to draw, so I'm going to read my directions. So number 5, I see that it's a rectangle, and it says 2 equal parts. That's all they want us to do, is to make 2 equal parts. So I could draw my lines this way, or I could draw my line that way. Let's draw it horizontally instead of vertically. So let's try horizontal. Okay, I'm going to do my best. I want 2 equal parts. So that means I have to cut it in half. So if this was like a cake or something, and I wanted 2 equal parts, one for me and one for my friend, I have to cut it equal. We want to share and be fair. So let's see if we have 2 equal parts. Well, let's count. 1, 2. So did we draw lines to partition this shape? Yes. And how many lines did we need to draw? Well, we only need to draw 1 line. But really, we cut it in half and we made 2 equal parts. See how this word here, 2, matches the 2 parts? 1, 2. Alrighty. Now, let's try number 6. That's a tricky one. We have to draw lines to partition each shape. Now, this is what the directions tell us. It says we need to draw 4 equal parts. So I look here first. I need fourths. Now, if I remember from the beginning of our lesson, there's an easy way to cut this into 4 equal pieces. I'll draw a horizontal line in the middle. I'll do my best and go like that. That looks like halves, so I need to cut the half now in half. And I'm going to go up here. Now let's check to see if I have 4 equal parts. Let's see. Let's try red. 1, 2, 3, 4. I do have 4 equal parts. And if I remember from the beginning of the lesson, that's called 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So now I just partitioned my square into 4 equal parts. Pretty simple. So boys and girls, when you do your homework tonight, this is really what you're going to be doing. You're going to be reviewing halves, thirds, and fourths. Okay? Now remember, I'm going to review right now. This is called 2 halves because I have 1 half here and my second half here. Now each one of the halves is a part of the whole shape. So this half right here it's a part of the whole shape, and this half over here is a part of the whole shape. Okay? Now, for our thirds, we have a whole shape here. And what we did was we have 3/3 because this shape here was partitioned into 3 equal pieces, or 3/3. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Now each one of these thirds is a part of the whole shape. Just like number 2, 2/3, it's part of the whole shape, and so is 3/3. It's part of the whole shape. Okay? Alrighty. Now, the last thing that we talked about was fourths. So this square we divided into fourths. Okay? 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. Now each one of these little fourths is part of the whole square. So 1/4 is part of the whole square. 2/4 is part of the whole square. 3/4 is part of the whole square. And 4/4 is part of the whole square. But we call this 4/4. So when we partition it, that's what we did. We partitioned it into 4/4. This was partitioned into 3/3. This one was partitioned into 2 halves. 1 half, second half. Alrighty, boys and girls. I hope that's helpful. Today, when you do your homework, do your best. And if you have questions, make sure you send me a message. Alrighty, we're going to have a Zoom lesson tomorrow. I'll send you the invitation on Class Dojo. Bye.